Let's give a round of applause for Conor.
Thanks. Oh, hi guys. I'm Conor from Blockpass. I guess we have one video to begin? Okay. If it works.
You are. Every time you open a new bank account, it's incredibly painful. What if you can fill in one last compliance form, get verified, and never have to fill one in again? Introducing Blockpass, the blockchain-based, safe, immutable, distributed whitelist of KYC verified identities. Simply provide your personal information and Blockpass will check it. Once marked clean, you can instantly interact with all Blockpass-enabled applications, like opening a bank account or exchanging cryptocurrency in seconds. And after you've been verified, we destroy your personal data. We are providing a foundation for seamless and trusted interaction between humans, companies, and devices. Blockpass, passport for a connected world.
Okay, so Blockpass initially, I guess we can go to the third slide. Yeah, so our immediate focus on Blockpass is to do compliance, shared compliance, specifically know your customer and anti-money laundering for the whole evolving blockchain ecosystem. It's probably the biggest thing that's needed right now. Like everyone's going to have to comply if the whole sector is going to mature, which will happen either way. We can get into that more later. I think it's more important to know where Blockpass came from and why we're doing this specifically and now, because we didn't just jump into compliance for the fun of it. So, can we go to the next slide? All right, so Blockpass started as a solar utility, specifically a DAU, decentralized autonomous utility. So, I know that was, well, I'll go into the model, but originally, let's just go to the next slide. Okay, so the background of how that utility actually started, Blockpass is a joint venture between Chain of Things and Infinity Blockchain Labs. So Chain of Things is the company that I'm from. We're based in Hong Kong, where we spent the last 2.5, almost 3 years looking at how blockchain can support IoT. Initially, it was for applications. You know, you have something chirp something to a blockchain that it saw or like sensed, and it's there forever. We thought that was pretty cool. But then we started looking a bit deeper into like the bigger problems that IoT and all connected devices have. So we go to that. Basically, it's two main issues: security and interoperability. It's like massive issues right now because everything is getting hacked, basically. So our conclusion over doing case studies and over the last few years is that identity for devices is the most important thing. And so this is not just a MAC ID or IMEI number, but a laundry list of metadata related to the origin of all components within each device for a number of different reasons. But the biggest initially is human or company ownership over a device. Go to the next one. So yeah, that's the biggest issue we find. So actually, go to the next slide. So we see it as a hierarchy that humans need to be able to own their devices in order to control who has access to the data, who has access to allow permission, or actuation. So if the device senses something and then it triggers an action, that needs to be completely controlled and governed by the human. And then also ability to permission devices to other people to use or completely transfer the ownership of the device itself. So without that, everything will be a complete mess like it already is. And some baseline protocol, a number of them are needed, actually, internet-style baseline protocols in order for the next industry of IoT to get to the next step. So I guess we can go to the next slide. All right, so the problem with the solar thing, the idea was that we would give identity to solar panel modules. This would be in the form of, I guess, a cellular connected, secure element with a kill switch. So whoever owns the device is able to kill the device remotely through cellular anywhere in the world. This model that we have here is actually very much the same as M-Copa's model. So I know M-Pesa was mentioned before. M-Copa was something that they spun out because it's basically Vodacom created M-Copa or M-Pesa, and so they already have all the dumb pipes. And with this model, you're able to have essentially somebody who, like a company that owns a solar panel and it is licensing it and eventually transferring the ownership to an individual. If the person doesn't pay like their daily, I guess their utility bill for the solar panel, they can just over 2G just like brick the thing. So it's a very interesting way. I think there are probably 20 companies in Africa doing this now. So we just made a blockchainized version of it initially because it removes almost all of the accounting and almost all of the friction from the system. So the problem was because the device identity concept is fairly new, there's no platform yet to connect human, company, and device identities. So instead of just doing a quick fix, we decided to pause this project and start Blockpass as a more comprehensive look into how these identities will work together. So, okay. Yes. Okay. Quick fix or Blockpass. But first, before we get to what I think is the most fun stuff, creating decentralized autonomous utilities, we're working on just compliance. So we can just go through to the next slide. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the initial thing is blockchain, just the entire ecosystem needs a new level of compliance. Like, everyone doesn't want regulation here, but the truth is regulation is good to a certain level. And if a lot of these companies and businesses don't abide by it, the whole like ecosystem will get shut down, or will get way more friction than it needs. Okay, next slide. Yeah, here's another slide just describing how difficult it is right now for companies to reach these, I guess, compliance standards. So the main point, like Coinbase spends maybe 20% of the cost of onboarding a new user, and that, not to mention how many people bounce from the site when they find it will take 2 weeks to actually get to use it. Next slide. ICOs, similar big issue. ICOs are kind of quite annoying these days, but especially when they raise huge amounts of money with only collecting like an email address and a phone number. Next one. So our focus is self-sovereign identity. Our model is a little bit different, but I guess we can, next one, I think there's, yeah, okay, so the way that this platform works is you would submit your information through Blockpass app, and we would hold it only temporarily as we have third parties check it. Like, they're on FIDO, like all basically the biggest KYC, AML compliance like companies out there. And so we'll take your full packet of sensitive data. It will get verified by a third party, and then once that's verified, we hash it immediately, and then put the hash on the blockchain. So on a whitelist. So the only thing that goes on chain is a hash representation of verified identity. That's it. All of your identification information that got passed is sent back to you, and then it lives on your phone. So we actually audit ourselves to prove that we don't actually hold any of the data. So hacking a single point of failure like Equifax and getting 100 million users is one thing, but it's much harder to hack all the individual phones. So now that you have the hash, the verified hash of your identity on that whitelist, if you change anything in that packet of information, it will obviously change the corresponding hash that you hold. So when you go to engage with a merchant, what happens is you simply scan a QR code on their website, and then it will pass them the hash representation of your verified account, and that's it. And then they will just go compare it against that list and find that if it is there, that you've already been verified. At which point it will ask you to approve sending them a certain amount of information on yourself that they'll require. So instead of them having to pay for brand new compliance every single time and wait a couple weeks for it to come back, they just use they use the verification that we've already done and pay almost nothing, or like a fraction of nothing, to to have access to it. So that's basically how it works on a high level. Go next. Yes, this is more about this is basically what I was just talking about, the whitelist. So yeah, I mean, the biggest benefits to businesses initially are just much more quick onboarding. Once you have this identity, it'd be very similar to how if you use WhatsApp Web, how you sign into the account through your phone, and then that's it. So it's really just streamlining this entire system, and also allowing for all sorts of new applications to be built that demand like a much higher level of, I guess, regulation. So, yeah, I mean, for individuals too, you get to own your own data. It's much easier to access this. You're not just sending like scans of your passport off to random ICOs that are just going to like sit on all of your information in their hard drive. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear initially. In the longer term, though, also. More than just like verification of your credit scores and all those things that are required. If you get a bank account, it could be added to this. So you could have verification of diplomas, of degrees, of all sorts of different things, and that will just add more weight to your identity score as you go. So, thanks. Yeah, so our current progress, we're based in Hong Kong. We will probably have an office in London that might become our headquarter office. We've been, actually this is a little out of date, we've been probably working on the app for about 6 to 8 months. It's supposed to launch the end of March, beginning of April. We're already quite reasonably funded. And right now we're just targeting exchanges, ICOs, the entire blockchain ecosystem, but we're also working with a number of different companies in the traditional fintech and government world. So. The future, as I mentioned before, how we got into it, the next step is working on identity for objects and devices. I know people have done little bits of this in the object space, where it's clear that you do have to own, or you do have to go through KYC and AML compliance before you can buy a house, or before you can own a significant object, which all the companies that are now digitizing these or blockchainizing them will have to follow the same standards. And then, of course, devices, giving devices identity from birth so that it can be owned and controlled, and then we can build the thousands of different applications possible there. Okay. Here's one example. Oh, this is the solar one, so just a little bit more detail on that. Blockpass is essentially a solution for a problem we had to do this, and this is the thing that I personally want to do more than compliance, but we have to do this first. It's just logical. So as soon as we're done with it, like we're going to use Blockpass to build this, and actually, can we go to the next slide? But it can also be used for other things. Like this is a shipping and logistics. We've been working on this at Chain of Things for the last like 2 years because it's the next natural industry that blockchain flows into. So yeah, I mean, once we have the identities of all of these different devices, we're able to, and individuals and companies like in this ecosystem, we can create much more simple smart contracts in situations like this. So we're also working on zero-knowledge proofs. It's not announced yet, but we just formed a partnership with Napier University in Edinburgh, and we're going to be researching how zero-knowledge proofs can work for identity, which also kind of rubs up against post-quantum cryptography and like dealing with quantum computing and how that will just like tear apart blockchains in their current state. So yeah, and I think that's all. Yep.
All right, guys, this is Conor. Thank you, sir. Question?
Well, I don't know, not for me, but no questions?
Oh, yeah, 3 questions.
Any questions? Yeah.
I keep seeing these identity verification apps coming out. There was this one last year, another one. But then it sits on my phone for months, and nothing happens from the team of the project. So I'm wondering, with this device identification, will that help move these projects
The device identification. I mean, that's one thing that none of the other companies, I mean, we're watching like maybe 50 companies in that blockchain identity space, so like where it's crowded. I actually didn't plan to get into it in this way, but yeah, I mean, for me, that's like the next big step for all of this. Like the tech is hitting like fintech applications first, like the lightest sort of implementations of blockchain. But from what we've been looking at through Chain of Things, like we never came into this from the cryptocurrency world. We came into it as like, what can blockchain do in the future for bigger industries that have issues with trust? So yeah, I mean, we see like IoT is not going away. Like we needed to have like a Star Trek kind of future, but it has a lot of major issues, and if blockchain can help with that. So yeah, I mean, the initial use of the app will be maybe limited a little bit to like signing up for bank accounts or ICOs or exchanges. It's not like you use it every day. But eventually that, like having that ID back in your possession, be pretty important for all the devices that you own. So if it's not us, it's going to be somebody else who will make some sort of way to have you own this all. Okay.
So, being based in Hong Kong, I realized that it's not exactly China, but ever since the takeover in '97, slowly but surely, China's getting more involved in the matters of Hong Kong, especially with their introduction of their social credit score. So I'm wondering to what extent this can be an independent enterprise and not nationalized, whether by China or any other governmental organization. Basically, governmental creep is basically the concern.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I could go on and a lot about that. Our foundation is based in Isle of Man, actually, and that's where the IP is held. So we're not, and in fact, like our headquarters are in China for Chain of Things just because it's right across the border from Shenzhen, where all the, like 80% of the IoT gets made. So that's our only positioning there initially, but we actually listened to that. We're probably going to move to London, or move the headquarters there, keep an office in Hong Kong, but relocate there for a number of different reasons. In terms of what China's doing, there's the social credit score. Like you also get blacklisted if you default on a loan and you can't buy airplane tickets or train tickets. But yeah, the social credit score, it's like they use CV to like watch your face as you cross the street, and if you jaywalk, you get a little like down vote against you. I mean, they're going to test it. Like everyone's going to have to test it. Like humans just tend to test the edge of technology until we figure out it's not nice and then come back. But yeah, I mean, we've been asked like to talk with like WeChat and stuff because they have a social credit score thing in their app, and like how would that work with this? And it's just like I don't know how far we want to go down that. But yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good question, and it's something that we'll probably have to deal with at some point or decide to not go over certain lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just necessarily China, because like other governments could see, well, China's doing this, and other governments becoming more corporatist, shall we say? So
yeah, I'm sure a number of governments will probably try this out in the future. I mean, there's a GDPR thing in Europe though, which forces you to be forgotten, I think, which is making all of this like a little more interesting, but especially with blockchain. But yeah, so. Yeah.
What are your barriers to doing work in the United States?
Our barriers? Well, the two joint venture partners, so one is Chain of Things. We've been based in Hong Kong. We're not we don't feel like we have to be there. And the other is Infinity Blockchain Labs, so a number of Japanese investors in Vietnam. And I think they have about a 150 person team right now. So it's just kind of set up like that already, but we definitely would like to be in the US. Like the plan is to do also like a securitized launch, like it's Reg D, I think, which takes a little bit longer. So we want to actually work with the SEC. Like we're close to the SEC through a number of different firms, including the Fort Worth SEC division that handles cyber crime, and I think they're the ones that dished out all of these recent subpoenas. So we want to know like what they want, and then we can like help them, because we don't want too much regulation, but there has to be some. So, yeah.
I saw in your slide you're talking, you guys are working with governments for like digital identities, and that's kind of what you guys have been doing. So like, instead of having a passport or driver's license, like in other countries, not in the U.S., but is that kind of what your Blockpass is going to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, it could go that way. I have a random title of special projects, so we have our immediate focus, which is the blockchain ecosystem and doing KYC, AML compliance, just to fit the huge need that's there right now. But there's so many different, very interesting, like other applications of the tech along with that. So I know we're like the UN and a number of different organizations are trying to come up with some way to document refugees or people who just don't have any identity at all. And so, yeah, that's it's on the agenda for special projects to develop or to at least explore like these sort of things. But yeah, I mean, we're not immediately building a passport for we need to update the video, but not immediately building a passport, so.
Right.
Oh.
Coming up. All right.
Yeah, my parents are from Hong Kong, and interesting. You guys want to know some interesting facts? In China, they have this app.